Hello and welcome. Welcome to everyone joining us live, especially many of the new faces we have here. And those of you watching on the replay, my name is Theola DeBose. I'm a former journalist and I went on to work in education and in the federal government under the Obama administration. And now I have created J Skills, which is the outplacement school for journalists where I teach you how to market your skills and find purpose in a new career. I do that in three ways: through the Life After Journalism course, through the email community, which everyone who signed up for this webinar is now a part of, and through weekly conversations where I teach on different concepts and also have guests, which brings me to my guest today, who is Andrew Astleford. Did I say that right, Andrew?
Oh yeah, Astleford. It's a strange name. I wish I was Smith sometimes or something.
Oh, so you actually pronounce the T.
Yeah, yep, that's it. Yep.
Interesting. Okay. Well, Andrew Astleford, who has been a journalist for as long as he could remember, actually, definitely going back to high school, and now works as a UX content strategist. So he plans to explain what that is, as well as talk about his journey. So welcome, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Theola. It's great to be here.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I like to start out by just talking about people as people. And so just tell us your personal background, where you grew up, where you're from.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I grew up in Southwest Kansas, a town called Dodge City. If you've heard the old saying, like, get the hell out of Dodge, that's where that came from. So, yeah, a
Ah,
little bit of a connection there. I born and raised, so I spent 19 years there. I actually began my journalism career there. I did stringing work for my hometown paper when I was in high school, wrote like little blurbs related to high school football on Friday nights from fax machines. They used fax machines back then, so that was kind of fun. So that was my beginning. And then I started covering like high school football as I got older and drove around the state there. So that was neat. And then I went to college at the University of Missouri. I knew I wanted to be a journalist when I was in high school. So I was like, I'm gonna go to college for this. So I went to the University of Missouri. It has a great J school. Enjoyed my time there. I wanted to go someplace that had a big sports program. So the University of Missouri had that. And I covered football while I was there, some other sports too, did some narrative long form writing, things like that. Really had some great mentors and editors. I worked at the Columbia Missourian, which is kind of the lab newspaper there. It acts as a city newspaper, but it's led by professors and it serves as a class, but it's kind of real world experience. So I had a great experience there. So then after college, I lived in a bunch of different places: New Orleans, St. Louis, Indianapolis, Tampa, Florida. Now I'm in Atlanta. So I bounced around quite a bit.
is that 5 cities? I was trying
I
to.
lose track every time I talk about it. Yeah, probably sounds good.
How did you know back in high school? I did not know what I wanted to do in high school. How did you know? Oh, I want to be a journalist. How did you know that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it started out because I like sports. I grew up watching football. My parents went to the University of Nebraska, so they had a great college football team in the 90s. And I started watching sports that way. And I was like, what can I do to be involved with sports? Because I knew I wasn't athletic by any means.
Ah,
So that's kind of like I don't know if it's a stereotypical way that some people get into that industry. But as I grew older, I enjoyed the writing more and the storytelling more. And I knew when I was in high school that I enjoyed that aspect of it a lot more, and just being able to tell people's stories and explore different angles of the human experience through sports, because it is pretty interesting, just the excitement you see, the various themes related to trial, tribulation, and you just see some really interesting angles of people's lives by covering sports. So that's something I knew I wanted to do when I was in high school. And so I went to college for that. And really was fortunate to have a mentor, Greg Bowers, who was a sports editor there, who had kind of a literary background. He was like a poet and other things. So I was really
wow.
fortunate to latch onto him early on. I was a freshman when I started being mentored by him. And so he really helped my like narrative storytelling chops and helped me develop that interest. So I was fortunate to have some great mentors there as I kind of developed as a journalist early on.
Yeah, my husband played football in college. He was recruited. I have
Oh,
2 boys. My daughter's too young. I'm not sure whether she would like sports or not, probably. But there's a lot of sports watching in this house. I love it too.
yeah.
And I love how, you talk about doing something out of these two loves. You loved writing, you loved sports. And so that just propelled you into that career. I love to ask people for an example of the most typical journalistic experience you've ever had, right? Like just the most like unglamorous, thing that you've done so that later, when we start talking about all of these other things you're doing, people remember that this is where you came from.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, wow. I have so many. It's hard to keep track. I've been locked out of a few stadiums or inside stadiums, I guess, where I was taking so long to write a story. I had to jump a fence to escape because they locked me. So that happened, I think, in Daytona, Florida, Daytona National Speedway, which is a huge place if you've ever been to it before. So I was trying to figure out a way to exit. So I think I jumped a fence. And it happened in Louisiana when I was working there at a high school stadium, a rural place. I guess it just didn't check the press box and noticed there was one lame guy up there past 11 o'clock at night still working. So I didn't
Still
jump
like, no, put the comma here, put the comma here, right? No, no.
Definitely, I
Right.
know, definitely. And then there have been experiences trying to file stories where before we had like hotspots on cell phones, I had to find McDonald's and find Wi-Fi wherever was nearby, and that was spotty at best. So yeah, I've had some interesting experiences I'll never forget them for sure.
Awesome, awesome. Now, I know that you, like you said, you bounced around and that you also experienced 2 layoffs in 3 years. So I often ask people first what prompted the transition. Sometimes it's internal, sometimes it's external, sometimes even a mix of both. So the first time you were laid off, tell us what happened.
Yeah, I was with Fox Sports at the time. I was a regional sports writer for them. I started with Fox in 2011.
Is that a website, TV? What is that?
Yeah, it was website. I was purely digital at the time. I did some TV work, but it wasn't a lot. I was mainly a website writer for them. But yeah, I started in 2011 with that company, first in St. Louis. So I covered like the Cardinals, the Rams when they were still in St. Louis, now they're in Los Angeles. But and then the Blues, the hockey team there, just kind of a general assignment writer. And I traveled throughout Missouri too, did that. And then I moved to Tampa, Florida with the same company, just transfer within the company, worked for Fox Sports Florida, covered the pro teams in Tampa and St. Petersburg, Florida there, and other areas of Florida. But anyway, they made a shift in just their approach of original content. It was expensive for them to hire writers like me, and they didn't want to do that anymore. They just thought they could use AP and wire stories and put that on their website and not have to pay writers. So unfortunately for me, that led to my layoff. It was yeah, in 2015. It was my first experience with the layoff. I kind of knew when I left college, it was during the Great Recession. I graduated in 2009, that I'd probably be laid off at some point. So fortunately I saved some just because I knew I was probably going to be laid off.
Wow.
But it was an interesting experience. So the next year I just kind of freelanced. I was trying to make ends meet wherever I could. And I was fortunate to get pretty steady work with a bunch of different outlets, but I was purely like a independent contractor. It was not steady.
You freelance just sports or other kinds of writing?
Yeah, it was mostly just sports. Luckily, in that area of Florida and the Tampa Bay area, there's a lot like spring training baseball, a lot of different teams. So I did some freelancing for like a Philadelphia area newspaper because the Phillies were training in Clearwater, Florida.
Got
And
it.
MLB.com, just with the Rays baseball team there, and then some stuff with ESPN, things like that. So yeah, I did mostly sports. Yeah.
How was that year? Did you like freelancing?
Not really. I mean, it was kind of nice in some ways because you just pick what your week and your day is going to be like. Like I would spend some mornings just walking on the beach if I didn't have anything to do in the morning. So we lived about 15 minutes from the beach, and so I just do that and anything to do. But it was kind of scary just to try to find work because that was most of the job was just finding work. And so yeah, that was really difficult. And for me, it wasn't a great way to live. I knew I wanted something full time where I had a consistent schedule, consistent work, and things like that. So it was kind of hard because it cuts to your core being laid off and going through that experience is like, who am I? Like, what is my role in this world right now as a professional? So it was a tough year. I learned a lot about myself, but I definitely gained some introspection from it.
What what were some of the I mean, or I should say, what were some of the personal things you did during that year that you felt like helped you learn more about yourself?
Oh, that's a great question. I had a great support with my girlfriend at the time, now wife. I have to give her a shout more. She supported me a lot during that time. We lived together. So that was really helpful to have someone with that emotional and personal support during that time. I think that was the most key for me just because
To just talk to to just talk to her and
yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah, you need that. I think that's so crucial when you're going through a change, whether it's a career or job change, to have someone who you can talk to and just let your raw emotions out. So there were definitely some moments during that time. I remember that. But also during that time, like I started looking away from journalism a bit. I applied for jobs around Tampa that had nothing to do with journalism at the time. So that was my first experience of being like, hey, maybe I want to do something else or have a life that's a little less traumatic, professionally, and not worry about layoffs as much. So during that time, I started applying elsewhere, other places. I ended up getting another journalism job moving to Atlanta because of it, but I did apply for other things outside journalism. That presented its own challenges with hiring managers and things like that when I was interviewing, but that was my first time kind of looking elsewhere outside journalism.
That's when you would get the dreaded, why should we hire you, right? You're just a journalist. And you're like, just a journalist? Do you know what I've been through? I've been locked out of stadiums. I've been this, right? And they're like, whatever.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was tough. I remember one specific phone interview where it was for a job in Austin, Texas. And he asked me, like, you have this great background in journalism, but this is for a job that's outside journalism. Why should I hire you, or why should we hire someone who's a journalist? And so my answer in that time was like, I'm versatile. I trust myself. I can learn stuff quickly and do a good job and be a good teammate. So for anyone out there who's looking for that transition, I would just say keep that in mind, just believe in yourself mostly, and just have faith that you can make the transition and do it well.
And someone will ask you that question, so just have an answer ready, right? Don't be like, I'm so hurt you asked me that. Be like, I was waiting for that question, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm so happy you asked me that, because it's obviously the obvious question.
Oh, for sure. I understand the question. It doesn't feel great to hear it in the moment. You're gonna have to think on your feet, but it is, I think, a popular question in job interviews for people with my background at the time, and then like people maybe now who have just been journalists throughout their adult life. People want to see, like, if we're going to take a chance on this person, can they adapt and evolve? And you definitely can. If you're a journalist, you've gone through so many different things, covered so many different topics, dealt with so many different people and personalities and egos. So you can definitely evolve and become something new.
Yeah, it's just about convincing them that you can. Speaking of questions, it's a great time to say, I have all of the pre-questions that everyone sent. Thank you. I am weaving answers to those in our conversation. I also encourage you to send questions during the chat. You can either put them in the chat or send them to me personally in the chat, or I think we have also a Q&A function. So those are your options there. So you end up getting us another journalism job. Are you like, yay? Or are you like, oh, I wanted to leave? Like, what?
It was interesting. Yeah. I was glad to get a full-time job. Like I said earlier, that was my goal at the time, was just getting something full-time, escaping the freelance lifestyle, having steady income and benefits, things like that. But a piece of me was like, I kind of wish I was doing something else or doing outside journalism a little bit. But I had a great situation in Atlanta when I first moved here. I worked for a Cox Media Group website, covered college football with a lot of good teammates and got to know them really well. And that job actually came about because I was writing for one of their competitors as a freelancer. So they're like reading my work and then kind of scouted me or whatever, and then just looked me up. And I got hired to do the same job I was doing for that other website as a freelancer. So that was fortunate. But yeah, I ended up going to Atlanta. Didn't know anything about this city when I first moved. Didn't know anyone here, but I guess it's my journalism background. I've lived so many places and met so many different people where it's like, I'll just go here and I'll make it work and meet people. So yeah, that's how I ended up in Atlanta here right now.
Wow, wow. And I want to note that a lot of times people who talk about their transition, at some point they say, oh, someone just called me. And it sounds like, well, that's lucky, right? But no, like you were actually doing the work to get noticed for someone to call you. So that's something else to also think about. And yes, maybe you've done a lot of work already in one area, but if you shift lanes and start working in somewhere else, that's where you could get noticed to then get picked up by someone else. So I just wanted to note that, because there's so many times it happened to me, it happened to our speaker last week, it's happened to you, where someone's like, I want this person. And it's because you were already doing something that then attracted them to you. So then came the second layoff, and then the start of the transition in earnest, right? Which I know people are dying to hear about. So, I mean, not dying to hear about your layoff, but just tell us what happened.
Yeah, definitely. So the second layoff was actually maybe more traumatic than the first. It's because our website was doing well. A few weeks before the announcement, they even told us they were expanding in different areas. So it kind of came out of the blue. But I learned that's how the corporate world works, especially if you're working for a big media company. You just never know. And it depends a lot on leadership and if the people who hired you are still there and stuff like that. So that wasn't the case when that happened. We had a new editorial leader at that time at the higher levels of our company, beyond my immediate little area. So she just wanted a strategic change, and our website wasn't part of the future. And so it just ended like that. So yeah, it was a few days from my wedding. I got a call and was talking to HR while I was on site for my wedding. We were having like our rehearsal dinner, I think the next day or something. So it was crazy. It was a weird weekend. I kept it to myself, except for my wife. Yeah, I just didn't want to ruin the weekend. So it's something I'll never forget. But at that point, I knew I just wanted to get out, and I didn't want to go through this again. It was just one of those watershed moments in my life where a change is needed, and I don't want to be put through this again. I work too hard. I feel like I give too much value to people to be treated this way. So yeah, I moved forward, and I was very fortunate at the time. Product manager at my company, Jason, knew me through my wife. His wife worked with my wife at the time. So he told me about a UX content strategist opening that was there at the time at my current company. And I was just looking to apply whatever writing jobs were available. I'll be honest, I didn't completely know what a UX content strategist or a UX writer was. So it's like, oh, a writing job, I'll apply for it, great. So I was fortunate to get the phone interview and then an on-site and latch on. I must say straight up that I'm incredibly lucky to have that connection, one, and then to have a hiring manager who is very embracing non-traditional entrances into tech. And I know that's probably not the experience everyone would have had, but my situation was just right at that particular moment where I was fortunate to latch on with my current company. So it takes a lot of happenstance in life to end up on certain paths. And that's definitely in my case here where, I applied not completely knowing what the job was, but I was excited to do it. I knew I needed something full-time outside journalism, and I'm glad I landed where I did.
I love so many things in that, which I am going to break down, because when you talk about your wife's colleague worked at a company, this is the company that you now work at. This person, let's call him John. John is saying, hey, wife of Andrew, we have an opening for a UX content strategist. And there are two things that you could have said at that point. You could have said, sounds great, sign me up. You could have said, what the F is a content strategist? That's crazy. Tech is evil. I'm not doing that, right? You didn't say no. You didn't say no. You said yes. So just talk to me about being flexible, because opportunities often come wrapped in this package that we don't recognize, especially as journalists.
Yeah, I think I was just so open at the time and so over my experience with the layoffs from like any opportunity to still write and create, because that's what I love to do. And at the core of what I am as a professional, like I'll jump on it. So I think it was just the perfect meeting of timing, happenstance, personalities involved, the people being willing to accept me for who I am and my background, even though I don't have the background, the job I'm applying for. It does take a lot of luck when you're applying for jobs, especially when you're unemployed. So yeah, I was very fortunate with my situation, but I knew going in, whatever job I was going to get, I was going to be super hungry so I could learn whatever I needed to do as long as I was creating or writing, and I knew I had faith in myself to do whatever I was going to do next. But I think the fact that going through 2 layoffs so quickly, I was just like super hungry to like learn something new and be like, I'm gonna prove my value, my worth. I'm gonna be a good teammate and just continue on in this new direction. I'm so glad I did.
Yeah, yeah. I love that, because also, had this person not just said, John, oh, we have an opening for a writer, if you were sending out notes, right, and just saying, hey, I'm open to writing opportunities, like, once you tell people what you're looking for, someone might say, oh, I've got the perfect thing, right? And maybe your wife was even doing that in that instance because they're just talking in the break room. So it's also really important to tell people what you're going through, because you never know who is in your network, right? Like you had no idea this person was here. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. All right. So what the heck is a UX content strategist? It took us 20 minutes, but we're finally going to answer the question. What is a UX content strategist? Break it down.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. It's great. Well, the UX content strategist, so the best way I can say it is we provide clear, concise, and useful content within the app at CallRail, my company. So in my particular job, I'm responsible for different parts of the app. I'm on a team of 5. So
wait, hold on. You say app, right? So first, the company is CallRail. So let me back you up. So what is CallRail?
Yeah, we provide marketing insights for marketers, like small businesses, agencies, things like that. So when people are looking to find out how their various campaigns are performing, whether it's on a billboard or a Google ad or a Facebook ad or something like that. We help them track who's calling their business via those phone numbers from the ads. So it's kind of an analytical tool to see how their marketing campaigns are performing. So they can go within our app, see the dashboard, see how many people are calling them from those phone numbers that are listed on the ads. And they can divvy up the phone numbers for particular ads or have a rotating number of numbers. Anyway, it's just a way for marketers to gain insights on their campaigns and see how they're performing.
All right, I'm still confused.
Sure.
All right, I need an example. So let's say I'm a flower shop, right? Theola's flower shop, right? Let's say I run some ads on Google because I want people to be Googling for flowers and to have me come up, right? Let's say I do a couple billboards, why not, right? Somehow I find you guys and then I download the app. Is that it?
Yeah, well, if you don't necessarily download it, you can sign up for a free trial from our website. And so you go through there and then, you just would set up all your information within our app and put the number in that you want to be tracked. And then anytime like a customer or prospect calls that number, you can see how often that number is being used or seen or driving interest. So,
so the idea is that if I have a flower shop and I want to market to people to come, but I want to see which marketing is effective.
Yeah.
Instead of myself trying to analyze all this stuff because I know flowers, I don't know spreadsheets, right?
Yeah.
I call CallRail. They're like, oh, let me sign up for this little thing on a website.
Yeah.
They are going to tell me what's effective, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or you'll be able to find out yourself just by using our app, but we have people who can help you, things like that. But yeah, it's just like if you use Google Analytics, it's somewhat similar, but you can definitely just track how often certain numbers are gaining interest or how often people are calling those numbers. So you can actually switch up the numbers based on different areas of your marketing to see which ad is being used the most or which channel is most effective for you. So yeah.
Okay, so you talked about narrative writing and storytelling, and so what kind of narrative writing and storytelling are you doing in this, right? Or said a different way, what skills, like what is actually transferring? Like help us understand what are you doing day to day that's actually writing?
Yeah, well, it's actually a lot different. It's almost like I almost think about it as Twitter sometimes, where you're trying to be really concise in a small amount of space, and that's the case with my job. Sometimes I go into wireframes, work with designers, write content in different parts of our app that will help guide users through our experience and instruct them how to complete various tasks, educate them about a particular feature, things like that. So there isn't much like narrative storytelling involved in my job at all. So that was an adjustment at first. I do video as well. So recently I did like a case study video that was more narrative storytelling in that way, where we interviewed someone and we went through like how he learned about us, what we've done to help him, things like that. So that was more beginning, middle, and storytelling in that way. But as far as the UX writing goes, it's almost like a different approach than storytelling in a way. You want to be more concise. You want to have each word count. You want to keep the user's attention, not have them just have too much decision fatigue and just become overwhelmed by your words. So it's definitely a much different approach than what I used to do, where I was writing like 2,000 word stories or things like that, or thinking about a cool like action beginning and things like that to draw readers in. It's much different with UX content writing, and I had to adjust to that when I first began.
Okay. This is so great because we also have a couple of questions and comments. So I am going to talk a little bit about what you just said, because every single person here and every single person in the world already sees work that people like Andrew do, but you're just not thinking about it, right? Like literally when you log into your Google email, right? Like the steps that you take to log into your Google email, sometimes there are words that are part of that. And literally somebody had to write those words. And they had to write those words thinking about, UX stands for user experience. And they had to think about the journey of the customer, the journey of you. And as you log in, what you need to do step by step by step by step. Email is not as involved. I'm trying to think of another example of a platform that maybe a lot of us have like signed into or like might be members of. But there are some platforms where you sign in and you have to follow. I mean, let's take something like Netflix, right? Which I actually laugh at sometimes because I used to watch Homeland. It's now off the
I
air.
did too, actually. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I used to laugh all the time about Homeland because, you know, every time you're on Netflix and any show comes up, there is a description of the show, the movie, whatever, right? And I would it was like a thing we had every week. I would make my husband laugh because I'd say, all right, I'm now going to like narrate what's in the little box for Homeland. And it'll be episode 8 and it'll say, Carrie makes a move. Saul thinks about next steps. And it's like the most dramatic, like big picture thing that like talks about nothing, but then explains all these little plot things. But it's like somebody had to write that. Somebody had to copy edit it. Somebody had to actually think about that. And so the point is, there are lots of different kinds of writing that are out there. And something that I said on a previous webinar was about understanding the kind of journalist that you are and the kind of writing that you like to do, right? And when we talk about writing that is like technical writing, and somebody was asking, is this similar to technical writing? I'll let Andrew answer that. But a lot of people, when they write, they like to actually be very structured and do outlines and go step by step by step, right? Maybe you're someone who might like going into tech writing, or because you have to be more structured about the words that you say because you want to get people to take very specific steps. Or let's say that you did copy editing, right? And like you understand language and things like that. That could be a really good segue. You know, for me, I could never write long, so I never did narrative, like hats off to you, Andrew, you know? But I don't know, I never thought about, okay, let me do technical writing, because for me, I actually loved reporting more. Like I can write, but I loved reporting more than I liked writing, actually. I would always talk to people and I'd be like, oh, this is so fun. I'm like, out. And then I'd be like, okay, now I got to write the story. Like every time, you know?
It's so hard. It's like good to have written, but writing is hard. That's true.
It's so hard. It's so hard. And so when I went into these jobs and I realized that I could do a lot of strategy and talking to people, I was like, oh, this is great. Like I could do all this stuff and like not have to write a story. It's like journalism without the deadline, you know?
Yeah.
But as a question that comes up right away that I want us to address is UX writing the same or similar to technical writing? Maybe like define those two. And then do you have to study, this actually came up in a lot of the pre-questions too. Do you have to study anything in particular to be able to apply to these kinds of jobs and then have folks say, yes, you are qualified because you have done X?
Yeah. Well, the first question, I would say it's different. I'd like to think of UX writers trying to be conversational, just warm to the user, give them confidence to complete tasks, things like that. Technical writing is more sometimes geared toward developers or people who are trying to install whatever app they're trying to use at the time. So I guess the audiences might be different sometimes. I've never been a technical writer, so I don't know completely, but UX writing has definitely evolved recently because businesses understood the value of being just welcoming to a user, making them feel empowered, things like that. So it's a little different approach.
For example, MailChimp, right?
Yeah.
If you sign up for MailChimp, or if you Google this, MailChimp has their entire user guide online. And like, it's the kind of thing where if you're signing up for MailChimp, but then you forget your password, like a UX writer would say like, oops, you know, oops, looks like you're missing something, right? And not like your password is incorrect, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that's more like technical writing versus like UX writing, right?
Yeah.
So yes. And so questions that are coming in now, it's like, okay, Andrew, maybe you didn't have to do this specifically on your resume. Maybe you could talk people through it in the interviews, obviously, because they saw something about your background. I don't know if you know what that is, but how do you signal, right? That's a big thing in tech, signaling. How do you signal to people, I can do this kind of writing, right? Like, what is it about your resume or your background, the skills that you have to signal to someone to say, I can be a UX writer?
Yeah, well, I think just with any job in general, it's about signaling they can show value. So I think any stats you can put in your resume is important, things like that. I had a job with the Cox Media Group position where it was actually pretty measurable, where I could put like, I had so many page views for whatever. So I put that in my resume, so that was helpful. But just being a
data,
yeah,
why is that so important?
Well, I just think it just shows value, like that you have measurable impact for a company. So any place you can put that within your resume, I think is important. It's kind of overlooked sometimes, I feel like. Again, shout out to my wife. She's a recruiter, so she gives me tips every now and then on things. But that's a good thing. But also just, I think journalists in general are specifically adapted being good communicators just with the general public, because we have to write for so many different audiences. We have to write for so many different subjects. So I think it's especially great for UX writing because I deal with a lot of different topics, and my audience is just, there's so many different small business owners, agencies, things like that. It's varying degrees of eyes and people who are interested in our product. So I think the parallels are there between journalists and UX writers, because we are quick learners. We can adapt. I mentioned it to you yesterday, it's kind of like covering a beat in a way. You kind of learn about a subject and try to become an expert on it, or at least well-versed enough where you can communicate thoughtfully about it. So I saw a lot of parallels as I grew within this role early on.
Yep. So we have a great question that I've seen before about creating a portfolio. Now, obviously in journalism, you have clips, right? That's how we used to get jobs. And so how do you create something that shows that you can do UX writing and then have that on your resume? Because people may be looking for that on your resume. Okay, you want to apply to this UX writer job. Some jobs may even ask for your portfolio. So how do you actually get one before you even get a job?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think just saving screenshots of things you've done, if you've written any blog posts or any kind of information that would help your company sell a product, I think keeping that stuff is an important thing as you go through your career. But yeah, I've started saving screenshots of various things. I helped with a website project recently on our reporting site on our .com page, where I helped with headlines and copy within that. So that's something I can point to and say, I helped with this project right here. So I think just saving anything you're proud of, and I try to display that on various channels online as well. I think that's important. I have a video or two that I'm pretty proud of, so I link that on my LinkedIn, things like that. So just keeping the stuff you're proud of, not letting it go away. You can save stuff as PDFs, things like that. I think it's very important as you go throughout your career.
Yeah. And it's true that that's all true. And some agencies still do want to see UX. I would say two things, right, to add to that. A, definitely save the work that you're proud of, and have that pride be coupled with impact or change. Impact is a word in the newsroom I used to hate. Reading stories with impact. But to audiences outside of the newsroom, that means some kind of change. Like, I know for me, when I went into education, I could say, well, I wrote stories that made school leaders change their policies based on the things that I was uncovering in my stories. So when I write, things change. So hire me, and then when I write for you, I'll make things change, right? And so it's not exactly UX writing, but have that confidence that things that you have written or edited or conceived of as projects have actually brought some kind of change, right? And then two, is that change measurable, right? Is there some number tied? Sometimes it's not. I'll just be like, they changed their policy. I don't have a number on that, but they changed their policy. Right? Sometimes you can say, oh, this happened and they had to spend $10 million or they had to save $10 million, right? And then there are also, I will say for UX specifically, because it's a growing field, there are so many free resources and communities that you can tap into if you're specifically really interested in UX. I'm talking about free Facebook groups,
Mhm.
Slack channels, websites that specifically you can join and lurk and then just listen to the conversation. And I've also seen specifically UX courses, like paid courses.
Mhm.
Now,
Exactly.
when it comes to paying for a course or paying for knowledge, it's like I can do it on my own by like this like patchwork of YouTube and all of that, and I am committed to that, or I can pay for this and then get an outcome, right? But and either one is great, right? I just say do it. Like if you're going to commit to YouTube, do YouTube. If you're going to commit to the course, commit to the course, just do it. But I say that to say that there are lots of options to get the knowledge out there. Even on Coursera, there's like free courses about UX writing. And so don't let the lack of that specific knowledge stop you.
Mhm.
Because even in Andrew's case, I mean, yes, Andrew got it through this connection, and there was an implicit trust, probably because of that connection, but also because of his experience. And it sounds like you had to learn your stuff on the job and not before the job, really. Uh,
Yeah. No, I'd like to just add that people are
yeah,
super helpful too, because it is such a new field in a lot of ways for a lot of different companies where I think people are so willing to share their knowledge, to offer tips to newbies out there, you know. So if you're interested in this, by all means, reach out to me, reach out to Facebook groups that you mentioned, the
mhm.
LinkedIn groups, other Slack channels. And there's so many people out there who are just so willing to spread knowledge about this growing field because we're all proud of it. I mean, we're all in it together and it's fun to see it grow. So yeah, by all means, just seek out that knowledge throughout the world. There are just so many people, not just in the United States, but the world, who have just great knowledge about this growing field.
Yeah, yeah. I want to ask a pre-question that I'm curious about based on this line of our conversation. So who do you work with in your organization most closely?
Well, it's really interesting. Like we're really tight as a UX writing team. We have a Slack channel where we communicate a lot with each other now, especially being remote all the time because of COVID. You know, we're talking each day. But day to day, I work a lot with what's called the growth team at my company, sort of finding ways to maximize conversions through our free trial experience, so getting people to pay for our product in the free trial. So I work with that team quite a bit. I'm the only UX writer on that team, so we're a cross-functional team where we have me, the UX writer, we have a UX designer, we have a product manager, and then we have some business intelligence professionals as well, two of those, and then one of our co-founders is also kind of the head of that team. So that's the team I work with a lot each day. So we have like daily stand-ups, talk about what we're working on, go through any roadblocks, things of that nature. Then we work on wireframes, like the designer and I will go through things quite a bit. The product manager too will talk during that as well. And so we'll communicate a lot, the three of us. But so I'd say that most of my time is spent with that team. I'll obviously run things by the content team as well. We have content community where we meet as just a content team and talk about various projects we're working on throughout the company. But day to day, I'm usually the only content person within my specific cross-functional teams. That's pretty interesting. I didn't fully realize that, I think, when I joined my company, just what cross-functional meant and how often I wouldn't see my team day to day. It's just kind of, I'm the
What does
writer for
that
the
mean?
group.
I mean,
Oh,
I think I know what it means, but tell us.
yeah, definitely. Well, I guess cross-functional way to put it is just like everybody has a specific duty to achieve the greater good. So like I'm the writer on the team, the designer designs the user experience, the product manager keeps us all on course to finish the project and complete the company's goals, things like that. The business intelligence people are looking at the data behind our decisions and helping us shape decisions based on what the numbers are telling us. So we all have various goals to complete our project. So it's not like I'm working with 5 different writers on this team. It's like I'm the only writer and I'm like the content expert and I give content opinions and guidance related on what I think is best, but I'm the only one in that team doing that. Other people have various goals and just expertise that just shape the greater good. So it's pretty fun to be a part of that and just see how we all just share our strengths to achieve something.
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying that, I was thinking back to the newsroom, and it's not unlike the newsroom in a way because the newsroom is a team. The thing is that the functions of each person on the team are so disparate that it's like, I don't have to interact with the, you know, page one designer unless something comes up,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I don't have to, I mean, I love photographers, so I would purposely interact with them, but it's like, I don't have to interact with these other people on the newsroom team. And the difference after journalism is that you absolutely interact with those people all the time. And it can be a shift to go from spending 90% of your time with sources
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
to 90% of your time with your work colleagues, like working on projects. And you're like, is this really the work? Because I see you all day, right? And it's like, yeah, actually, that is the work, right? But
Yeah.
then you still have that audience external focus, which is important. And that's what they need from you, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. And so there were a couple of terms that I wanted to unpack in what you were saying, because you talked about, I mean, all of these things that you know now. I mean, when we talked yesterday, you were like, I spent the first 6 months on the job totally clueless, right? So now you're like confidently telling us about your team and this person and that person. And in some ways, maybe the easy part was getting the job, baby. And then you got in there. And I'm just sort of imagining you like walking around, right? Getting a tour. And you're like, I don't understand anything you've just said, right?
Yeah.
So really, like, take us back to being clueless, employed, but clueless. And like, how did you actually learn and figure out this path and this industry?
Oh, definitely. Well, definitely a big shout out to my manager right now, Catherine, if she's watching. She helped a lot in those opening months. She's a great manager and boss to work for, and she was completely understanding about my situation. And I was very fortunate to land where I did because of her approach to managing. But yeah, I was just reading things like what you mentioned earlier, Slack groups, Facebook groups, articles out there, Medium articles related to UX content. I was just trying to soak in everything each day, and I'd spend some time. I remember like blocking off time just to learn during the day. So it's like almost being paid to, you know, learn about my job, which is interesting to think about. But yeah, I think because I was hired in 2018 and the industry had been around for a while, or the role, but it was still kind of new. Like it was understood that, you know, you're going to have to learn about this job back then. So I was fortunate in that way. But yeah, I was just trying to soak up everything each day. And I remember even creating a doc at the end of my first quarter at the company, maybe, where it's like, you know, these are the resources that could help new hires in our department. You know, so that was kind of fun. I used a lot of the things that I looked at to kind of pass it on, and hopefully other people in the future can use that as well. But yeah, there are a lot of great resources out there about UX writing, though. Like I said, Medium's a great place. People link to stuff all the time within the UX content Slack group.
Medium is great. And actually, Microsoft has a beautiful section. Hopefully maybe I'll get, because there's also another former journalist who now is a UX writer at Microsoft. And when I was talking to her, they have this great whole section where they just talk about the work that they do. And like why they do it. And I'm like, this is just amazing. It's just a great resource. But what I love about what you're saying is that you can't skip the step of just research and doing the work, right? Okay, because and it's like everyone wants this hack, and like the hack is actually do the work. It's like actually sit there and do the research and like Google and save these links and read them later and do all this stuff, right? Because that's the only way that you can learn. I mean, shout out to everybody here, because this is a hack, right? Like you're showing up here, you're learning, you're listening, you're asking questions, and that's exactly what you have to do. Things like this more and more to then figure out, do I want UX writing? Do I want UX design? Do I want something else? Do I want to go deep into marketing and, you know, get my data skills up and do that? Do I want to do data science? But we have a question about, do you write in Word or do you write in a specific program? And I would love to know more about like, how much do you write? Are we talking sentences like, oops, this is the wrong password? Or like, you know, like what do you actually write?
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, that is part of it. Things like error messaging, CTAs on buttons.
Call to actions.
Yeah, yep. Call to actions. That's right. Yeah. And then,
okay. So like a button, you know, subscribe here, join now.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And all right, hold on. I have to like have a moment there. So
sure.
How much discussion might there be about what the actual word should be on a button?
Wow, you'd be surprised some of the things we think about. It's almost like splitting hairs, but it's important stuff. That's stuff we talk about within our team channel sometimes on Slack. It's really interesting, but there can be a lot of thought. And we have a great UX researcher at my company, Brittany, who does user interviews. So she talks to users and she asks them, does this make sense? You know, what you're going through. So we'll develop some of our decisions based on those as well. So there can be a lot of work behind just a few words of text in a modal, like the little pop-up windows you see on a screen, so stuff
Yeah,
like
the
that.
pop-up window.
Yeah, and then
Right now, do you want to do this? Right. I mean,
yeah,
I live on the right. Don't we all live on the internet? But you don't think about a little human had to write that annoying pop. You're just like click away. You're like X,
behind the
right?
curtain. Exactly. No, definitely. And beyond all that, like I also write support documentation. My boss actually created kind of our support site where she was the first person to write support articles. So our team manages those. So if we have feature updates, we update support articles related to those. We write new ones if new features come out, things like that. So I write support documentation. I also make the support videos where I show users step by step how to go through everything within our app. So visual learners out there can see how to do things. So those are embedded within the support docs. So I make that. And then I work within Figma. The actual writing for the app is a program called Figma, where it's a collaborative tool with designers where they can design their user flow, like just how a screen or experience will go. And then I, as a content person, I can go in and actually type the words within there, within the wireframe. So that's super helpful. And so most of my writing for the app goes through there, but for like blog posts and things like that, I'll write in like Google Docs or something like that. So good old Google, you know, things like that. I'll just use that.
I would love to have been the person to invent Figma, right? There we go.
It's a
And
great
so,
tool. Yeah.
what was the learning curve in learning that?
It wasn't that bad actually, because it was an improvement over our previous process. We used a program called Envision, but with that we had to leave comments as writers for the designers to change the copy. So there's like this added steps where we couldn't change the copy directly ourselves as writers. The designer had to do it. So yeah, I was just so excited once we got Figma and our UI expert showed us like, this is how you directly enter the copy within the screen. And we were so excited. So it was actually a really easy transition as a writer to use Figma.
Yeah, that's like when I would manage design projects and you get back the files from the designer and all you could do was leave little bubble comments
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
Adobe. It was so annoying. You're just like,
Yeah.
I need this to change. It was horrible. I think that there are better tools out there now, but also being open to just learning new tools. I don't want to put Catherine on the spot, but I kind of want to do by just saying that I invite Catherine, if you want to message me, I'd love to hear your perspective as the boss. Like, because I'm telling you, you have journalists here who are talented, amazing, and they are hungry to know, like, what did you see in someone like Andrew? And like, how can I be seen like you see Andrew? So if you have any thoughts that you want to share, please, I welcome you to do that. Okay, let me make sure that I get some of these. Oh, Catherine will write out her thoughts. Beautiful. Thank you, Catherine. Okay. I know that you have mentioned this in passing, but I want to make clear, because I had mentioned this before also in some previous videos, about the importance of stepping into a job where the people who hire you understand you have been a journalist and that they are willing to work with you. I mean, how did you feel like some of your colleagues received your past journalism experience?
Oh, it was great. Colorado's been amazing. The culture there is one where it's a lot of ambitious, but also like laid back people. It's a cool balance. So, you know, once I joined the team, I just felt at home. Really, it was great. Like especially the person who knew about me before was completely like receptive and helped me learn about the company as I was there. Kind of took me under his wing for the first few weeks. That was super nice. But yeah, I mean, they just treated me as a member of the team, and I jumped right in. They didn't really care that I didn't have a background in tech. That never came up once, really, which is really nice. That made me feel more comfortable too, as I was just learning what the job was and what this new field was for me. So I think that was very helpful, because I think if I would have felt pressure to like prove myself in some way, or people were putting me down or whatever, it would have made the transition a lot harder, but that was never there. So I'm really thankful for the chemistry that was there when I first arrived. So yeah, just a very easy transition and very helpful.
That's amazing. And that's very important because, again, we all want to make this transition. And we want to find that job, but the boss has to understand exactly who they're hiring and what they're hiring. You know, you see this a lot in different roles. Sometimes with like PR, they'll say, oh, you were a journalist, so if we hire you, then that means that we're going to get in the Wall Street Journal because you worked at the Wall Street Journal. And that's such a false expectation for them to have, right? Or it's like, Andrew, you've been a journalist, so now you can lead all of our writing seminars. And it's like, you have to be very careful about the assumptions that they're making. And if it's not a fit in that way, then even if it's a job dangling, you're going to be miserable. And I know that some of us have had that experience where you've taken a job and it seemed like people thought you would do X because you were a journalist, and they didn't understand that it's really Y and Z and A and B, and then it didn't quite work out.
Yeah, I would advise anyone just when they're looking for places to work to find that place that'll allow you to grow within the role in whatever way that you feel most comfortable, because it can be hard to be pegged as a certain thing if you enter a new company and you have this particular background, the company expects you to be this or whatever. Like, you should be able to grow in the way that is most beneficial for you and that will allow you to do your best work. So yeah, that would be one piece of advice I'd share.
Yep. Now there was a pre-question around what would you say is the greatest challenge you've faced on the journey of this transition?
Oh, yeah, the whole transition as a whole. Yeah, that's interesting. I just think at the beginning, like I said, just learning the job, because I think a lot of people are this way, especially if they come from a journalism background. You want to become an expert as quick as possible with something you're working on. So I kind of approached my job that way, where I was like, I want to be at least capable. I don't want to let the people down who are trusting me to make this transition well, because there was a certain amount of pressure that I felt during that time related to that. Like, I didn't want to let people down. That's just kind of a fear I have in general throughout my life. So yeah, I kind of was thinking about that early on, but it's something that people around me made me feel comfortable, encouraged me where I needed to be encouraged, and allowed me to grow in certain ways. And it just felt fantastic going through that process. And I think it went as well as it could have, because I had all that support. So yeah, I just think at the beginning, like getting hired, it felt good. And I was like, oh, wow, I have to become a good teammate throughout all this. So learning the job and becoming good at the job was definitely a challenge early on.
Yeah, I love that actually, because I know that we want the job, right? You want the new job. And it's like, that's not the end, right? That's not, all right, I got the new job, I'm done. Like, I got the new job, and then all this new level of stress comes in. And that's not to discourage anyone. It's to say that you will always be learning. You will always be, this is a journey and it takes time. And so you get the job and you're like, great. And then you're like, oh shit, basically, I gotta like do all this stuff now, you know? And I think it's important to talk about this, because people will get jobs. You guys will get jobs. Andrew got a job. And that there's a whole other set of steps that happens after that. It's like basically the transition continues. You know, for women, they talk about childbirth a lot, and they say the baby's born, and then they say there's the fourth trimester, right? There's like 3 trimesters, and then the fourth one's like after the baby's born. So it's like after you get the job, there you go. All right, I want to read Catherine's note out loud for everyone. So Catherine says, what I look for, I don't know your voice, so I'm just going to look it up. What I look for when hiring is seeing how someone can really simplify tasks that might be intimidating to a customer. So again, the context, everyone, is that we're talking about you as a user or me as a user in a program, and I need to follow written instructions to complete a task, sign up, learn more, download something, okay? So what Catherine is looking for in a candidate is someone who can really simplify tasks that might be intimidating to a customer. So she said, I found that people with any type of writing background know how to rearrange and reorganize content to fit within design constraints, right? Or restraints, as she says. And they know how to break down a story to tell all of the most important pieces of a story. It's almost like looking at words as pieces to a puzzle. I think storytelling is an amazing skill. Yay, thank you, Catherine. That helps us form the right message. And the data analytics puzzle piece is of it is about finding the balance between what we need to tell customers on behalf of the business and how we can say it kindly to the customer to delight them. And so she hopes that answers the question. I love that because it reminds me of when I did our session on the live resume review. So please go back and watch that video if you haven't watched it. And actually, I don't have that video, but in there, so show up live next month on June 10th, because we talk about how you have to break down your journalism experience and not just say, I was a reporter, or, I was a copy editor, but you have to say, on this project, I did these things. I took this story and I wrote the story this way. I did it this way because of this. This is what we encountered. Really having someone else understand your process of writing, your process of reading a story, editing a story. And in that process, you will show someone else, oh, this person understands how to tell stories in different ways, how to break things down. I see that as attractive for what I need to accomplish for our work.
Yeah, exactly. That's fantastic. A term that we use quite a bit is we always want to be user advocates within our job as content people, because we're writing customer facing things and we want to help the user feel good about using our products. So I always try to keep in mind, I want to be an advocate for the user in design decisions and any content I create. And I think that's really important and a great way to kind of think about what a UX content strategist does and just a content person in general within a business. Yeah.
Yes. So I encourage anyone to copy what Catherine says in that chat and just put it somewhere, because you have a hiring manager who has said what they look for exactly. We have a couple of minutes. I haven't asked this question and I wanted to, because we talked about the tension with tech and journalism and, Facebook and Google and those kinds of companies, the things that they've done to grow have also impacted journalism. That hasn't been the only reason for the decline. I will be very clear about the business model of journalism not being diversified for years. And so there's that. But talk to me about the tension that you may have felt, or how journalists should think about, if I go into UX writing, I'm going into tech, I'm sort of joining the enemy. I mean, it's a sort of like bigger dark side question, but just talk to me about it from the tech perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it is important to believe in the company you're working for. And I believe in CallRail's mission and who we help and the goals we're trying to help people achieve. So I don't know if it'd be that way with every tech company out there. I won't name names, but I think like that is something you have to keep in mind as you go through your job search and the companies you're considering. You have to believe in the place you're working at and spending 8 or 9 hours a day working on things for. So I will say that it's kind of too broad a brush to say like all tech's evil, but I understand like, the hardships that journalists and journalism faces because of what certain developments in tech have brought along. So I completely get that and understand, but I will say there are a lot of companies out there doing a lot of interesting things, helping the world in a lot of different ways. And if you find that, you'll feel fulfilled and just enjoy what you're doing each day.
I think that's a great way to end it. We do have 2 minutes. And I'll just look quickly. But I'll say one last. I did call this session Shifting Priorities and Purpose. And I based that on some of the writing that you had done about talking about your transition. And so how would you describe how you shifted priorities and purpose from this transition?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. Oh, man. I just think I've learned what I valued in life. And as I was going through my job search, I wanted something where I could have balance, where I could have decent hours and be a happy person and enjoy what I do. And I found that with what I'm doing now, all of those things and more. I don't think I had that in some of my other journalism jobs. There were things that were missing that I wish, like certain things were out of whack, like the work-life balance was bad. I like my teammates and what I was doing in my job, but I'd work weekends and nights and I was missing out on a lot of different things. So I think just reevaluating what I wanted in life after going through my 20s is chasing this one thing I wanted since I was a high school kid, and kind of just growing and evolving and being like, hey, I can do something else. I can find something that makes me happy. That's not what I've wanted throughout my whole life, pretty much. That's okay. And it's okay to change perspectives and goals in life. And I think being brave enough to understand that and having mentors and people who have shaped me into what I am today. Having those people close by has been so beneficial and something I'll always be thankful for no matter where I go throughout my life.
Thank you. So well said. I just thought about how cool it is that you are not only on this webinar, but on this webinar with your boss. And that's like totally cool and amazing. So if that's not the biggest sign of like a total transition, like, I don't know what is. He's like, here she is supporting you, cheering you up, answering questions.
I love all my teammates. They're fantastic. It's a great group. We have a good chemistry going.
Amazing, amazing. So thank you guys very much for joining. You will get a survey right after you close out. Appreciate if you can fill it out because it shapes who we invite next and what we talk about. So thank you for joining, and I will see you next week. Thanks again, Andrew.
Thank you so much, Theola. Take care.
All right, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.